So, Salam Alaikum everyone. Welcome to 41st meeting of Contemporary Debates in Kalam. We are sorry for the delay. There was a time change probably in London, so we were thinking that from Turkish time it will be at 1 hour later. So that's why we are starting a little bit late. We are sorry. So today I'm pleased to introduce you Shoaib Malik, which everyone of course knows because he is our usual moderator. So let me start with reading his biography. Shoaib Ahmed Malik is assistant professor at Zayed University in Dubai. He obtained his PhD in chemical engineering from University of Nottingham. Upon graduating in 2015, he joined several programs at various Islamic institutions from which he gained Ijazah in Hadith and Aqidah. He recently obtained Master's in Science degree in Philosophy of Science and Religion from the University of Edinburgh and is currently doing an Alimiya program at Al-Balagha Academy. His research has shifted entirely to the realms of atheism, science and religion, and Islamic theology. He has published articles in international journals such as Zygon and Philosophy. He has book chapters with academic publishers such as Cambridge University Press and Palgrave. He published a short monograph on atheism and Islam with Kalam Research and Media, and he has a full monograph out with Routledge's Science and Religion series on the topic of Islam and evolution. He's currently working on another edited volume for Routledge, 8 Classical Perspectives on Islam and Science. So I myself am interested in evolution and Islam, so I look forward to read his book. Actually, it's one of the books which is exciting me I'm waiting to read it. So it would be an honor to listen to his presentation about his book. So the floor is yours, Shoaib.
Bismillah. First of all, thank you, Mehmet and Enis, for inviting me. I really appreciate the invitation to discuss about my book. So I just wanted to, again, apologize to everybody for the time changes. Like I said, we had an issue with getting the clocks organized. So today, I'm just going to briefly discuss my book, which is coming out with Routledge. The official publication date is on the 21st of June, but hopefully there'll be an earlier access, inshallah. So this is what I'd like to briefly cover today, and I just want to make this announcement in case people don't know about this. But a very good friend of mine paid for the book to be open access, which means you can now download it for free wherever you are in the world. You don't need to pay a dime to gain access to the content. The link for this will be out soon, inshallah. I just sent the last edits for this monograph today. So they're kind of working through it, making sure the Arabic and everything else is fixed up and what have you. So that's one news that I think that everybody can appreciate, that you don't need to buy this book. It'll be available for free no matter where you are in the world. As long as you have an internet connection, you should be able to download this, inshallah. So this is the overview of today's discussion. So I want to be very clear that I'm, of course, not going to be able to discuss every single thing in my book. It's a 140,000 word monograph. It's very dense, so I'm not going to cover every single point. What I'm just going to do is explain my motivation and rationale for this book, just some concluding summaries here and there, and just how I've arranged the discussion matter so that when you go through it yourself, inshallah, it'll hopefully make more sense. So think of today more of as an entry point and as a blueprint of when you read the book for yourself. So the 6 things that I would like to cover at least is just briefly explain my rationale for the book, then quickly go over the science of evolution, because what I like to do is I make sure that everybody is on the same page when we discuss what do we mean by evolution. The science should be just at least on the basic principles. We should be all clear what we're talking about. I'll then go over the problems which generally Muslims have with evolution. This will then be followed by an overview of the book. So going through the chapters, just kind of explaining why I organized the book this way. I'll then give you a summary. So throughout my book, I've done a very large literature review of all the different opinions out there. And I come up with a classification scheme, and that's what we'll cover in the different position section. And then finally, I'll tell you that if you adopt Imam Ghazali's framework, then how much would he agree with evolution as a theory according to that classification? So yeah, by the way, feel free to throw in your questions. We'll hopefully take them at the end, but I'm just going to go over this presentation slide as best as I can meanwhile. Right, okay, so for me, if many people see a problem, a friction with evolution, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to this, that evolution is a very, very sensitive topic because it can get very serious and very polarizing. It's very common, at least for me, to find that individuals throw some very heavy words around. So for example, kufr or bid'ah, like kufr means you're stepping outside the fold of Islam if you believe in evolution. Bid'ah means you're committing heresy, right? Those are very, very strong labels to attach to something like evolution. And for me, the starting point, if I wanted to kind of show that Islam and evolution, is at least compatible to some degree, you need to have a theological outlook. And that's why I started with a theological footprint. I wanted to make sure that I was looking at this discussion primarily from the angle of theology. Now, within Islam, we have multiple schools of thought, right? The broadest division is the Sunni camp and the Shii camp. I am a Sunni Muslim. My academic research is in Sunni Islam. And so within Sunni Islam, there are three main theological schools. These are Ash'arism, Maturidism, and Atherism, right? So if you're a Sunni Muslim, you generally fall under one of these three camps. I personally am more inclined towards the Ash'ari school, which is why I particularly focus on that. And within the Ash'ari school, again, you have intra-school differences because it's made up of different individuals. You have great figures like Imam Juwayni, Baqalani, Imam Razi, Ghazali, etc. I focused on Imam Ghazali for several reasons, which I have highlighted in the book. The most important reason is simply that he has a vast corpus to his name. He's a well-known figure. So if it can be shown that you can use his framework to evaluate evolution, it can at least remove a lot of the negative polarity that we see in the Muslim world. And more than that, Ghazali is I'd say one of the most studied scholars in Islamic intellectual history. So there's so much primary, secondary, and tertiary literature on him, so that even people who are unfamiliar with Ghazali can go on and access those works. So those are the two main reasons why I focus on Ghazali to analyze this particular issue. So what I mean by I've taken Ghazali, I've taken his metaphysical ideas, right? So his metaphysics and his hermeneutic framework to tackle the discussion of evolution. So we'll see as we go through the following slides that evolution raises a bunch of issues. Some of them are scriptural in concern. Some are them because of philosophical issues or theological issues. So that's why I kind of make it very clear that I look at his metaphysics and his hermeneutics. And my primary frame of reference when it comes to Ghazali is his Kalam hat. So for those of you who are familiar with Ghazali, Ghazali can sometimes be a difficult thinker to pin down because he wears many hats. He has a rich corpus, right? Sometimes he's writing as a Sufi, as a mystical thinker. Sometimes he's writing as a jurist, as a faqih, right? His works like Al-Mustasfa min Ilm al-Usul is a fiqh book. Sometimes he's writing as a theologian, a kalam scholar, right? A mutakallim. So I make it very clear that in this book, I'm looking at Imam Ghazali strictly as a theologian. So I'm not interested in his jurisprudential opinions. I'm not interested in his Sufi opinions. I'm interested primarily in his opinions as a kalam scholar, particularly as somebody who adopts the Ash'ari worldview, right? Then to make it even clearer, this doesn't mean that I've just taken his works and just applied them. This is not a blind application of his ideas. In addition to taking his ideas that are pertinent to the topic, I've also kind of introduced new variables to the discussion in light of contemporary developments in philosophy of science and philosophy of religion. Some conceptual nuances that are very helpful, which of course didn't exist in his time, but I think are relevant for today. So for example, the whole discussion about methodological naturalism versus philosophical naturalism, those kind of things, I think there are some nuances in there that I try and introduce when looking at his framework and how we can apply to address certain questions. Finally, in this work, so I know that people can approach the discussion of Islam and evolution very differently. Some people take a very obliterating approach in trying to just destroy the science of evolution altogether. They raise their epistemic standards. They just want to show that evolution is false altogether. Other approaches are, okay, you take the science as a given and you try and see how much of it can you accept theologically. My book is of the latter. So I take the science as a given. So neo-Darwinism we'll take as a starting point. Of course, I go through the theory in detail so that even people who don't know about the science of evolution, they have an overview of the theory in clear terms. It's not technical. I've tried to write in a way where it's easy to digest. And so we just take the science as a given, take neo-Darwinism as a given, and then see how far you can accept it within the Ash'ari school as understood by Imam Ghazali. So this was the rationale, the starting point of this book. Now, just to quickly go over the science of evolution, because I think it's important to start with this and then move on to the overview of the book in terms of the chapter breakdown. Neo-Darwinism, I've just simply understood it and I've explained it in the following way. These are just 3 core principles that you need to know. So if you've never heard of evolution, just keep these in your head, right? The first concept is deep time. So neo-Darwinism is a theory that requires that there be a very long time on Earth, right? So Earth is not just a few thousand years old, it's a billion years old, right? 4.6 to be exact. The universe is about 14.6-ish. That's the first principle of Darwinism. New Darwinism, sorry. Second principle, common ancestry. So this is one of the biggest breaks that we have of a general understanding that God created each species kind of instantaneously. Whereas evolution, it's one of its core principles is that everything in the biological kingdom is related like in a family network. So there's a father and there's a mother, they have kids and they have kids, and you keep getting on and you get this wonderful branching process, like a family tree. Evolution just takes it one step further by saying this is true not just for individual species, but it's true for every single biological entity out there, which entails that humans did not just come into existence instantaneously or miraculously. It entails that humans must have had some kind of a precursor species. And so, and to make this even more explicit, the general understanding that Adam and Eve were created miraculously, from which humanity sprang forward, becomes questionable in light of evolution. So that's why there's a little bit of a tension that we see here. Finally, the mechanics of, so this is now how the process, how evolution works. Natural selection and random mutation. Random mutation is simply this idea that the diversity that we see in our biological is mostly driven by mutations in our genetic makeup, right? Natural selection is simply the idea that species acclimatize to their locality. So a very crude example is if you put a bunch of bears that have very thick fur in a very hot environment, eventually the ones with very thick fur will die out, and bears that have very thin fur will more likely to survive. So you see an effect of the environment on what kind of things pass through or survive on in successive generations. Putting all these 3 together, right? All these together make up the idea of neo-Darwinism. And in terms in terms of understanding evolution as a neo-Darwinistic paradigm, this is what I mean by evolution. And so there's a picture that I put on the right-hand side. As you can see, there's a branching process. It entails that humans were not just created instantaneously or miraculously, they're part of a large biohistorical network. So given that, given this description of evolution, what kind of issues do Muslims have with this theory? In short, there are many. I mean, you can find a lot of different criticisms against evolution. Enis and Mohammed know but very well. They've studied this topic as well, and they've researched on this. But the most common ones, at least in my opinion, and from what I can gather, the first thing is, as I've mentioned, there's a scriptural tension between evolution on the one hand, particularly common ancestry, and the creation narrative of Adam. That seems to be one of the main concerns that Muslims have with this theory. The second concern is the underlying naturalism, which also is linked up tightly with atheism. So evolution is a very naturalistic theory. It's kufr, we shouldn't believe in it. That kind of stuff is thrown out there. The third is the randomness component. So people, when they think of randomness, they believe that God doesn't know what he's doing if evolution is true. It seems like God is like a tinkerer. Like he's creating things, but he's like a dumb God, but he's like a dumb deity. So that kind of raised a lot of concerns. And the randomness in the mechanism of evolution also suggests that, humans are a lucky accident because, as according to Stephen Jay Gould, he mentioned that if you rewind the tape of life, so if you restart the process, there are so many contingencies in the process of evolution. There's so many chance-like factors that there's no guarantee humans would come out again. There's no guarantee whatsoever. So that makes it look like that humans are just one lucky accidental species. And that's why randomness is, again, a huge thing in this conversation. Another one, and this is more recent, is the whole discussion of intelligent design. So intelligent design, as you guys know, is a huge movement in the US. It became very popularized in the Muslim world, particularly through the works of Harun Yahya, which I think some of you guys might be familiar with. And then finally, there's an issue of morality. So some people make the claim that if evolution is true, then that means we can use evolutionary pressures to kind of justify all kinds of things. If it is all about the survival of the fittest, we can even kill off the poor, we can kill off the weak to kind of help improve our society. So these kind of narratives are thrown around when it comes to the topic of evolution. Again, I'm summarizing the criticisms that Muslims have or the sensitivities that Muslims have. There's a lot more to it than what I'm saying here. So all of these are kind of discussed in my book. Now, to give you an overview of how I've laid out my monograph, I've divided it into 4 main parts, right, to kind of help you navigate the discussion systematically. The first part is just me kind of setting the tone of the discussion. So chapter 1, what evolution is and isn't, it involves looking at what the theory says in a little bit more detail than what I've just explained here. Talks about the principles of the mechanics, talks about the evidences. It goes even through a history of evolution, because some people claim things like, Darwin was an atheist. He came up with this theory to kind of undermine religion. So a lot of these myths I kind of shatter as I go along. And then I also go through various objections at the end of the book. So this is one of the biggest chapters. Chapter 1 is one of the biggest chapters that really tries to explain the science of evolution without the politics or the unnecessary apologetics that get pinned down with the whole science. The second chapter, I think we have to be very clear that the longest engagement with the theory of evolution, both on a theological level and on a philosophical level, has been done by Christians, because evolution was born and developed in a Christian context. So naturally, it's been appropriated and it's been looked at through those lenses for the largest period of time. So what I do is I summarize a bunch of different opinions in there so that you get a very good overview of how Christians have responded to this theory. And both of these 2 chapters in part 1 kind of set the platform for the upcoming chapters. Part 2 is all about explaining the Islamic side of things. So in chapter 3, it's like a quick review of all the verses and the hadith of the Quran. Sorry, all the Quranic verses and the hadith, right? In various different, books, Bukhari, Muslim, what have you, so that you get an overview of how Muslims have generally understood creation narratives in Islam. So I go through a couple of things. The creation of the universe, is there a chronology? Creations of non-humans, right? So animals and plants. And then we go through the creation narrative of Adam. Okay, so that's what I kind of do in chapter 3. This is not a critical discussion, it's more of a description so that you just have a baseline to work with. These are the verses, these are the hadith, and this is what we're going to be dealing with in the remainder of this book. Chapter 4 is one of the largest chapters, about 20,000 words, I think. And in that particular chapter, what I do is I cover 20 different opinions on Islam and evolution. And there's a table I'm going to show you. I developed my own classification scheme within which I put people in. And then that kind of gives you an overview of how people have responded to evolution in terms of both accepting it in Islam or rejecting it. And surprisingly, people are not rejecting or accepting for the same reasons. People may reject for very different reasons altogether. And I tried to make that apparent in that particular chapter. So for those of you who are looking for a nice literature review of the topic, chapter 4 is for you. Finally, chapter 5, it's an article that I've already published before. This is not a new material. This is an article that came out with Zygon. And in here, I just break down a particular narrative that says that, we have we have contemporary scholars who suggest that our previous medieval Muslim thinkers were talking about evolution. And I kind of go through 4 of them. So for example, people like Al-Jahiz, Rumi, Ikhwan al-Safa, and I kind of show through those works that they were not talking about evolution. Instead, they were referring to a metaphysical paradigm known as the great chain of being. And of course, there's a lot of, a linguistic similarities, structural similarities as well, but to call them evolutionists is a bit of a stretch. And I think people do that because they want to say, hang on, we're just kind of going back to an idea that's within our own tradition. But I suggest that this is a false way of doing this because they in fact weren't discussing about evolution. So it would be incorrect to say that we have evolutionary ideas. Of course, we have some ideas within these texts that relate to biology in general. So for example, Jahiz, he talks about things like when you move animals to different locations, they change. But that's a far stretch of saying that macroevolution or speciation occurs. So that needs to be made very clear. Once I've kind of done that, then I look at the 2 big components of the whole discussion. Part 3 is all about the metaphysics. So things like naturalism, chance, inefficiency, intelligent design, morality. In chapter 6, it's the biggest chapter in this section. I introduced the Ash'ari paradigm as per Al-Ghazālī's thoughts. And then I juxtapose Al-Ghazālī's thoughts with a modern movement in science and religion known as the Divine Action Project. So I try to settle Ash'ari theology in a contemporary discussion to kind of show where and how they agree or disagree, right? Just to kind of make that framework apparent. Once I do that, then I kind of go through discussions of naturalism, how that can be understood from a theological framework, the issues of chance, teleology, how God is an inefficient, creator. Those kind of things are discussed in there. I think a lot of people, particularly in the Muslim world, I feel intelligent design is a huge thing. So I dedicated a whole chapter on that to show, for me personally, intelligent design is a rubbish argument. It has no basis in my personal opinion. Within the Ash'ari framework, it's completely irrelevant if it's being used to prop itself as an argument against evolution. And the details for that are mentioned in there. Finally, there's some concerns about morality. Again, the Ash'ari school is very well known to be upholders of divine command theory. So I kind of discussed that in light of evolution. And then finally, in the 4th section of the book, this is all to do with usul tafsir. So all to do with the Quran and Hadith. In chapter 9, I set up Al-Ghazālī's framework. So this includes his understanding of aql wa naql, his relationship between reason and revelation. I talk about his usul, how does he interpret things literally versus non-literally, and then also his understanding of hadith. How does he understand hadith in his hermeneutic framework? Once I have set up his hermeneutic process, I then evaluate all those 20 opinions that I discussed in chapter 4. So again, this is one of the longest chapters in the book. It's about 20,000 words again. And so I kind of sift through the various arguments that people have for evolution using scripture, people arguing against evolution using scripture, and I kind of work my way through. And that kind of, pretty much ties up all the loose ends of the book. So by the end of the book, you should see how the metaphysical problems are understood from the Ash'ari paradigm and how all the hermeneutic issues are also understood from the Ghazalian framework. So that's a snapshot of how I've arranged the material. Now, in my work, right, as I said, there are 20 opinions that I look at. All of these are contemporary opinions, Dr. Shoaib Ahmed, Dr. Al-Ghazālī, Dr. Al-Dajjani, and a bunch of others, right? So many people are up there. And there are many ways of classifying this, right? So there's a lot of ways. For me, the most constructive way of classifying these positions was by focusing on common ancestry, right? And I give my rationale in the book for why I do that. But in short, I wanted to kind of make it clear what exactly were people rejecting when it came to evolution and what they weren't rejecting in terms of common ancestry, because this makes it very, very clear in how far they can go with the scriptural concern. Because the other stuff like randomness, naturalism, those for me are very minor concerns, theologically speaking. Those are very, very minor concerns. The biggest concern for me is the scriptural stuff. So here I have 4 different positions. You have creationism, which is this idea that everything that evolution says about common ancestry is false. it is 100% false. That means humans, non-humans, none of them are products of evolution. Everything was created instantaneously, right? And you have people like Sayyid Hussein Nasr in this category, Harun Yahya, he's in this category. Zakir Naik is in this category. So a few people are in this category. The second position, as you can see there, is human exceptionalism. This is the position of Sheikh Nuhamim Keller. He's an American scholar. Sheikh Yasir Qadi, who's also an American scholar, alongside his student Nazir Khan. They believe that evolution is true, but when it comes to the question of human beings, it's false. Human beings don't come under the rubric of evolution. So that's why you see X's there for humans. Adamic exceptionalism is the idea that evolution is true, including human beings, but the only exception to that process is Adam. Now, what do I mean by that? So in this case, in this particular thesis, the idea here is that the Quran and Hadith definitely, they give credence to Adam being a miraculous creation. They don't deny that. But what this position says is that there is nothing denying in the Quran and Hadith of there being other human beings on earth when Adam and Eve were created. And so those human beings could have been products of evolution, and Adam's descendants could have mingled with them. So there's like a lineage in there. I have diagrams for these I'm going to show you, but this is what it means. That evolution for humans could be true, humans that existed alongside Adam and Eve, and we just have one isolated miracle of Adam and Eve. And then finally, you have the no exceptions camp, which believes that you can actually believe in everything in evolution. Common answer is true for all cases. And there's no need to kind of resort to either miracles or what have you there. And some people come into that camp that I look into. So these are the four positions that I analyze. So what should be very clear is that creationism and no exceptions are opposites of one another. So they completely, vie against each other. The middle ground seems to be the human exceptionalism and Adamic exceptionalism camp, right? Now, I'm just going to show you two pictures to kind of sharpen the distinction between human exceptionalism and Adamic exceptionalism. These are as follows. So if you look, so these are common ancestry trees. So these are like family networks. What I just want you to focus on is the very, very right figure, right? So this is a scheme of potential, branching processes of evolution over the past 2 million years for hominids. Now here, according to human exceptionalism, as I've said, Adam was the first of Homo sapiens, or humankind, Adam and Eve. And so they do not have any connecting lineage with the past. So that's why there's a break between pre-sapiens and Adam. So I don't know if you can see that white circle, but that is what that is referring to. That Adam is an isolated miracle. He starts off the Homo sapien line. This is human exceptionalism. So humans are in no shape or form connected with a preceding lineage, no shape or form, total isolation. When it comes to Adamic exceptionalism, this is slightly different. So if you see here, there is no problem with humans having a preceding lineage with entities behind them. But the only exception is Adam. And these are potential representations of where Adam could be in that scheme. He could have been before Homo heidelbergensis, afterwards, pre-Homo sapiens, whatever have you. The main thing here is to state that Adam and Eve are taken as a given that they're miraculous creations. But there's nothing in Quran and Hadith to negate the possibility that there could have been other human beings on earth when Adam was created miraculously. This is this position, Adamic exceptionalism. So this is hopefully a summary that you can look into in more detail in the book. Sorry, this is the summary, but hopefully you can get into more detail in the book. But this is what I kind of devised as I was going through the material. Now, when it comes to the understanding Ghazali as a Kalam theologian, right? How would he interpret these positions? So metaphysically speaking, we Ash'aris believe generally that God can do anything as long as it is logically possible. So all of these positions are within the capabilities of divine power, no problem. God could have created us instantaneously. Creationism is valid in that scenario. Human exception is also valid. God could do it that way, no problem whatsoever. God could also create us through Adamic exceptionalism or no exceptions. All of them are absolutely permissible within the Ash'ari framework in terms of God's creative powers. Now, is it scripturally possible for my conclusion of the whole thing is that creationism is compatible with Quran and Hadith. I'm not saying that this is the opinion. Please don't be confused by that. I am saying this is compatible with Scripture. Creationism is compatible with Scripture. Human exceptionalism is also compatible with Scripture, and so is Adamic Exceptionalism. Where Ghazali, I think, would disagree is with the no exceptions camp, because of certain parameters that he adopts. So for example, things like miracles, not reading things figuratively, or not straining certain verses. But I'm not going to go into that in detail. I mean, just going through his hermeneutics is a task. But this is the conclusion that I reached, that in most regards, he can accept a lot of these things, but he will not accept, I think, the idea that Adam and Eve had a mother or a father. I think he would, the closest alignment that you can get between Al-Ghazali's framework and evolution would be Adamic Exceptionalism, where you believe that, common ancestry is true, even the mechanics of neo-Darwinism is true, no problem there whatsoever. But Adam and Eve would be an exception. That couple is an exception to the process of evolution. So this is my summary. I know it's a little bit skimmed and it's a short overview, but I just wanted to keep this very succinct and precise so that hopefully you guys can have more questions on this. But like I said, because the book is very dense and my time is very limited in terms of presentation, I wanted to kind of give you the best bits overall, and then hopefully we can have a conversation afterwards. So that's it from my side. I don't have anything more to say on that. So Dr. Mohammed, do you want to cut a break, or how do you want to do this, Enis?
We don't need to give break, and we can continue if you want.
Okay.
So Shoaib, thank you very much for your presentation. So before going to the questions, I will make a few comments if it is acceptable. So it is a nice presentation, I think, and the structure of the book is quite good. One thing usually Muslims are missing is that neither you have like two cases. Many people think that either you will have to accept evolution as a package and you have to deny it as a package. Actually, there are many claims in evolution, as any theory makes a lot of claims. So you need to pick and choose. You may pick and choose certain claims. Like you can see sometimes Muslims denying that mutations can be useful in the name of religion, while you cannot find anything about mutations in any of the scriptures. Mm-hmm. I want to ask as a question and give as a criticism, maybe, as about your claim that Al-Ghazali's metaphysics cannot be reconciled with like non-exceptional creations, such that also Adam is a part of the evolution. So
he
what?
Can be.
Sorry?
I said his metaphysics can be.
With Adam having father.
Yeah.
Can be made consistent.
Yeah. Metaphysically, yes. 1 second. If I show you the diagram again, I said that there. So if you notice here, let me make this. So can you see this, Enis?
Yes.
So you see the tick there. Metaphysically, it's possible according to his framework.
But scripturally, it's not possible.
No, I don't think you'd accept that.
That was the point I was going to ask, like about the scriptural possibility. Sorry if I said metaphysical possibility. So in my defense usually about that evolution is consistent with scripture, I use two scenarios. Actually, I approach the problem like problem of evil. For me, there is a claim that evolution is inconsistent with religion. So it's actually kind of problem of evil. And I prefer, rather than developing a full theodicy, I prefer to develop defenses, scenarios which may be possible. We don't know whether they are true. And one of the scenarios is actually that Adam is created twice. Mm-hmm. So he's not just created once, but twice, once in paradise and once on earth. Yeah. And one can claim that both he has a father and he doesn't have a father. Because if you are created two times, I call this Ibn Khaldunian defense, because he thinks, for example, that Adam was 40 meters tall in the paradise and he is now like a normal human being when he came to earth. So it's perfectly possible to claim that Adam was created in paradise without father, and then when he was brought down, maybe he had a father here on earth. So what do you think about this scenario? Do you think that this scenario makes scripture possible to read together with?
For me, I think I need to be very clear about this, right? There's a difference between, there are two words that in scripture that are important, qat'i and zahir, right? And these are not necessarily one and the same. Qat'i means that something is crystal clear. There's no debate about it whatsoever, right? There's no verse in the Quran that is qat'i about Adam having parents or not having parents. There's no verse. No verse says Adam does not have parents in explicit formal language of the Arabic. Nothing. So the best defense that people usually have that Adam had no parents is zahir, the most apparent reading of the verses. And that this apparent doesn't mean literal. It means the most immediate reception of the verses when you read them in light of their thematic and historical context. The collection of the hadith, now again, so this comes down to how much of the hadith you want to crystallize in your framework. So ahad hadith or not, Bukhari or not, or what have you. But if you put all the hadith together, all the verses together, and the narrative seems to be that he was created without parents. And the verse that kind of really stings the whole discussion, for me at least, is the verse where Adam and Isa are being compared for two reasons. One, the verse in thematic context does not make sense to interpret of Adam having a father. It reverts the general discussion. Number two, the sabab, so the historical episode of that verse is based on a hadith in which Christians there's a debate between Prophet Muhammad and Christians, certain Christians, a sect of Christianity. And so in response to that, because there's a disagreement about divinity of Isa because of him having a father, this verse comes down. And from my understanding of the Arabic, this seems to be the clinch pin of the whole discussion. I mean, all the other verses, you can kind of understand the way you're seeing it. You can have like a double creation scenario. I can see that. But this verse for me makes it difficult. I don't think that he would, I don't think he'd have that parent. Of course, I'm saying that he would disagree with that interpretation, right? And I don't think he would call it a kafir opinion. I the whole thing about whether Adam was created with father, I don't think that's a kafiri discussion at all. I think that's a whole new standpoint to go to. But I definitely feel that he would be very inclined towards the idea that Adam was a miraculous creation because of that verse.
What do you think about his opinion? Was Adam created on earth or in some other place, according to Al-Ghazālī? And how was it to earth?
So Al-Ghazālī had a tafsir work. We don't have it. We don't have access to it. So I'm using his hermeneutics to make a decision. I'm not saying that this is what Al-Ghazālī would agree with. I'm saying if I take Al-Ghazālī's framework and I apply it, this is what I conclude. That's my personal conclusion. What Imam Ghazali would say, I don't know. I'm suggesting that he will not likely agree with that, because for him, you got to bear in mind, right? Why is there resistance towards this idea of interpreting having a father? Because of miracles. Ghazali's framework, as an occasionist, he has no problem with miracles. So if somebody uses this as an argument, okay, for me, this is not a problem. Why should I cave in? So for me, and this is one of the things that I showed, that his metaphysics is heavily tied in with his hermeneutics. These are very, very systematically tied with one another. And so for me, the biggest discussion is actually, even though hermeneutics is where the main problems are, the actual bone of contention is on the metaphysical plane, whether you accept miracles or not. And I think that's what seeps down to these disagreements. For the people in the no exceptions camp, most of them, as far as I can tell, do not want to tolerate, or they believe that we should have an agnostic stance on miracles. Whereas I think for the others, they still believe that miracles are possible. That's one of the reasons why they disagree from one degree to another with evolution.
So thank you very much. Let's take the questions. So
sure. Right, yeah.
Farid Dun?
I'm sorry, what?
Yes, it's me. Yeah. Just give me 2 seconds. I'm going to turn on my my camera so it's nicer.
Okay.
Could you see me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good. Hi, assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for your lecture. I missed half of it, so I apologize if my question is something that you've already addressed. But you did mention earlier that you are working mainly with Al-Ghazali's hermeneutics, which I think is a really good way to approach such a subject. Have you looked into, or is there in fact any way that the theory of evolution could be in a way parallel or is similar to something like a material cause as conceived by Ibn Sina and Aristotle, and perhaps in the sense as that these are preparatory causes at a purely material level, that that Ghazali would be able to respond headlong, as it were, theologically or metaphysically or something.
So you're asking me if there's a parallel between Avicenna's metaphysics and evolution? Is that what you're saying?
No, not the metaphysics, not the metaphysics as a whole, but simply the conception of material cause, and how certain material substrates, as it were, has active forces within themselves, like natures.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And maybe from that, and maybe is there something that in Ghazali where he responds directly to that issue in a way that you could extrapolate a more direct engagement with evolution, as it were.
Okay.
Maybe the analogy is not there. So if you can clarify whether the analogy works at all.
Yeah. So I would say the analogy doesn't work because Ghazali, regardless whether it's the theory of evolution, whether it's quantum mechanics, whether it's general relativity, all of these are, under Creationism, have no active nor passive intrinsic powers whatsoever. So if evolution is true, it's just a process that's being orchestrated by God, right? So that discussion is not with the science or the theory. That's this discussion between two metaphysical fields, which is Avicenna's framework and Ghazali's framework. So there is no parallel, but I'd say it's just going to bounce back up to that domain.
Right. So I guess it just goes back to Ada in a way.
Yeah. That's Imam Ghazali's understanding that creation, one, is fundamentally contingent. Number two, no thing in creation has any intrinsic or active powers. Of course, there's now a tension between free will and occasionalism, which I concede to. I don't deny that. But what I'm saying is that in his metaphysical framework, evolution is completely possible. Completely possible. So so when people say evolution is an idea that if you accept it takes you outside the fold of Islam, I think this is false, because God can do it if he wanted to. He could have done it if he wanted to. So that's the reason why I kind of avoid that kind of rhetoric. But hopefully that answers your question.
No, it's good. Thank you very much.
Nazif Muhtaroğlu.
I think Dr. Shahnawaz Ahmed was before me.
Okay, then let's Dr. Shahnawaz Ahmed. Can you hear us?
Dr. Shahnawaz?
So my question is about the Adam and its progeny, because we have the narration saying that two siblings were born at the time of the Adam and Eve, and then in the second year there were two siblings, and those were married in a crisscross way. I want to know the authenticity of this, and there are many hadith which say Allah will call Ibn Adam, O son of Adam. So we all consider ourselves as the son of Adam. So how this concept is related to that there were the father of the Adam and there were some homo sapiens before the Adam, is another concept that Adam is the first prophet, not the first human being. I want to understand this.
Okay. So Dr. Shahnawaz, the proposal, so this proposal is put forward by an individual called David Solomon Jalajum. So you can definitely, so I've interviewed him as well. You can check him up for further details. And also read my book as well. So you can do either of them, whatever you feel comfortable with. In response to your question, the first thing that I wanted to highlight, so the hadith about Cain and Abel marrying the sisters, those are all, as far as I remember, da'if hadith. They're not strong or authentic. Or other variations are Israeliyat, if I'm not mistaken. So their authenticity cannot be taken at face value. Of course, we don't necessarily reject Israeliyat, but we don't necessarily accept them. That's the first thing. Number two, however, even if you took them, let's just say you took them at face value, there is no logical disconnection between Adam and his kids, committing incest, because that's what it was, right? It's brothers marrying sisters. So they could have done that, no problem. But that doesn't deny that there was a pocket of community of people there alongside. They just maybe mingled later on. The verse doesn't deny any of that. The hadith doesn't deny any of that. As for your second question about the idea of Adam, you mentioned Abu, right? Abu Bashar? Yes. That's yes, yeah. So the word Abu does not mean first. it means head, right? We have Abu Huraira, doesn't mean cats come from him, right? So Abu is a kunya. It's meant to be a designation of a title. But that title in of itself does not mean the first of something. In fact, as far as I can tell, there is no verse, there is no hadith that says Adam is awwal bashar or awwal insan. Nothing. No, there's no explicit statement whatsoever.
So there is another confusion related to it, that God saying to the angels that I will create the Adam. Does it means that he said that I will create the humanity or the human beings, not the single person?
So no. So in Adamic Exceptionalism, there's this idea that Adam definitely was given takreem. By takreem, I mean he was definitely given nobility. He was given honor. There's no doubt about any of that. And he may have been gifted certain things that maybe preceding entities or coexisting entities on earth did not have, possibly, right? We don't know. And that's the key thing. The scriptural details on what existed on earth prior to Adam's descent is moot. It's silent. So, and here's the argument. So this argument relies on a hermeneutic principle known as tawaqquf, okay? Let me explain what it means, just so that I can hopefully help everyone understand this, right? Tawaqquf, at least in the theological level, means that you remain silent. And so, for example, in the conversation of dinosaurs, the Quran doesn't say believe in dinosaurs. It doesn't say ya ayyuhan nas amanu bid dinosaurs. It doesn't say that, right? The Quran also doesn't negate the concept of dinosaurs. So when there is no negation, nor is there affirmation, both of them are plausible. They're neutral with regard to the Quran. So whether you personally believe in dinosaurs or not makes no difference. The same way, the Quran does not negate the possibility of there being other human beings that could have been products of evolution. We don't know. Scripture hasn't revealed that to us. Adam was a special creation, no doubt. Adam was in karama, no doubt. He was given, we know that he was taught language. What these other things were, I don't know, because the Quran is completely silent on them, right? So definitely he takes the creation narrative of Adam at face value. So the whole idea of Adam and Eve, them eating from the tree, then descending down, whatever have you, takes that at face value. No one is rejecting any of that. But the Quran does not negate the possibility of there being other human beings there on earth. That's what his point is.
Yeah, at the same time, I have the question, because I read the evolution, and as this student of biology, I know that that there is evolution happening within the organisms, and there are some exceptional cases where we can find the connecting links between the two different species, or between the two different kingdoms, or different families, or different orders, or at different classes. There are different connecting links where we can understand that this have emerged from there. But have you read, because I have not gone through this, but you have worked on it, have you read any relationship saying that humans or any other organisms were having some connecting links apart from Neanderthal and Homo habilis? Because I consider them as a human beings, not I don't consider them as the different creations. But
right.
Have you read any reference regarding to this?
So with regards to references of common ancestry between chimps and all of that, what have you, that's a scientific discussion. Personally, I don't care about any of that.
Okay.
I frankly don't. For me, it's a theological discussion. I'm saying if that possibility is there, that's all that matters for me. So I take the science as a given. I don't question the science. And I use that to go into theology. That's my approach.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yes, Nazif Muhtaroğlu, now it's your turn.
Good evening, everybody. I congratulate my friend
Nazif.
For this nice presentation. And I would like to share my personal opinion with everybody about. I had the opportunity to read the earlier drafts of the book and give some comments to Shoaib. And in my personal opinion, this is a game-changing text about the discussion on Islam and evolution. It's a very significant scholarly work that has the potential to influence the serious scholarship from now on. Nobody can, ignore this work from now on. And this is because the issue was analyzed in terms of many different aspects. So evolution is not just a scientific theory. Certainly it has scientific basis, but usually it is in the daily life and, philosophical circles intermingle with certain metaphysical assumptions. And Shoaib nicely distinguishes these two aspects and analyzes the theory from a single consistent framework, not by focusing on many different divergent traditions in Islam, because there are too many different schools in the Islamic intellectual history. One should take one of them because one needs to be philosophically consistent in his approach to the problem. And he takes Al-Ghazālī, one of the giants of the Islamic intellectual history, and applies his metaphysics and hermeneutics, not just one of them, but two of them, both of them, because usually the discussion is analyzed just in terms of metaphysical implications or scientific entailments, but the hermeneutical principles are usually ignored. I think this is a great achievement to analyze the issue from many different angles. And we need such works, such multifaceted works in many other areas, applied to many other issues. That said, I have a question, Shoaib, and in addition, Enis can also answer. So today, when the issue of evolution is discussed, especially within the philosophical circles, there are two main interpretations. One interpretation is basically has the naturalist metaphysics or metaphysical assumptions, saying that this is a very natural process. There is no divine role involved in it. And the other approach, which gains popularity recently, says it's a kind of evolution is a process guided by God. It's a guided process. So my question is whether there is empirical evidence to choose one of them to other. Not philosophical evidence, be careful here, empirical evidence. Because some people say some concepts like convergent evolution justifies the guided interpretation of evolution, the divine guidance. They indicate the divine guidance more, I have to say, likely than the other interpretation. What do you say about that? You both can answer the question. Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Nazif. So, Enis, do you want to take that first, or you want me to take it?
You can take it if you wish. If I have some additional comment, I will make it.
Right. So for me, whether evolution is convergent, that signifies some kind of eventualness or purposefulness or teleology, makes zero difference to the equation. There is no empirical point that makes one thing more likely than the other. So because it's open game for both. A naturalist could argue that convergent evolution is because of the physical and biological constraints that we know of. And the same data set can be interpreted by the theistic evolution and say, aha, look, you see, it's inevitable that we were supposed to be created. So these stretches of imagination can happen on both sides of the count. The conversation cannot be scientific to determine a metaphysical paradigm. These are categorical confusions to begin with. The science is operational under both a naturalistic framework as well as a theistic framework. What matters is not the science, it's the underlying metaphysics. And this is something that I make crystal clear in my own work, that even if, like many people rely on it, it's very close to intelligent design. Like people say intelligent design, wow, evolution is false. I say that intelligent design, if the universe was super designed or poorly designed or no design, there were no regularities whatsoever, that wouldn't undermine God. That wouldn't undermine God operating it. It would still be God able to do it. So I think that, yeah, there's no scientific evidence whatsoever for either or opinion. I think that's just pure speculation, in my personal opinion.
So
Enis, go ahead.
I agree in the main point with Shoaib. I don't think that these two different interpretations of evolution can be differentiated with empirical evidence. However, if convergent evolution is true, which seems to be indicated, and if it is not coded somehow into chemistry, it means it is not inescapable for emergence of similar patterns independently. Actually, we should expect that Stephen Jay Gould is right, but it turns out that even though the clock is independently playing, similar patterns emerge. One may perhaps argue that this gives us some kind of design argument. Again, not an empirical proof for the existence of God or empirical reason to believe that God is involved in the picture, but you will have a case similar to the fine-tuning argument. You have very unlikely scenario, so it's very unlikely for emergence of similar patterns independently, but this unlikely scenario happens. And one may claim that theism provides an explanation for this unlikely scenario happening. So actually, we should be always looking for evolution, how likely it was to happen in a way which it happened. If it is necessary, then there's nothing we can say. But if it is very unlikely, and if it happened, and if you don't have any naturalistic explanation, then it would be a good argument for the existence of God. I don't know whether we can construct it, but certainly it's well looking for it. So next question. So I see whether there is a hand raised. So if not, I will look at the chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, thank you, Shoaib, for your nice presentation. I benefited it a lot. So I had some chance to see Ghazali's attitude in terms of atomism. You know, Ash'arites usually regard that atomism is very certain, very important theory. Mm-hmm. But since Ghazali, in his Tahafut al-Falasifa and some other books, when the case comes with scientific facts, at that time, he said that philosophers have some strong arguments depending on geometry against atomism. He stops criticizing, he stops discussing with them because of the fact that philosophers have strong arguments. Also, we know that in the introduction of Tahafut al-Falasifa again, when the case comes with metaphysical issues, which are speculative, which are not certain, he usually rejected metaphysicians by saying that there is no any scientific or certainty on this issue. But when the case comes with scientific facts again, for instance, he criticized those who disagreed with some scientific facts depending on some weak professed sayings. He said that this is completely waste of time in some extent, and he prefer interpreting verses or even reports. So the question, depending on this attitude of Ghazali, what would Ghazali say if he saw that there are a lot of scientific evidences, I mean cumulative cases arguments coming from paleontology, coming from material, and coming from also some other sciences. What would Ghazali certainly say about evolution? I think maybe he even would try to interpret some Quranic verses depending on these scientific fact.
Mm-hmm.
If we compare his attitude,
right.
In introduction, what do you think about on his attitude? I think.
So for me, I think there's two comments I want to make. So first of all, his attitude towards atomism. So I make it very clear that atomism is not, because it's a physical ontology, I'm not interested in that. I'm mostly interested in occasionalism. So I completely divorce that Ash'arism. I accept Ash'arism has two main constructs, occasionalism and atomism. I have no interest in atomism. In fact, I call it a secondary thing now in Ash'arism. For me, it's not a main thing. The main thing is occasionalism. You can have a range of physical ontology in there and it's still compatible with occasionalism. That's one thing. The other thing is, for me personally, for me, the closest thing he would probably argue for, and as immersing myself as I can in his corpus, the closest thing he would argue for is Adamic Exceptionalism, because it makes no difference to the theory of evolution. Absolutely zero difference. From a scientific angle, you can believe, whatever you want, because you can believe in common ancestry, humans had common ancestry, just Adam and Eve are exceptions to the process. It's the same way where I don't think he's going to study fluid mechanics and thermodynamics and reject Abraham being put into the fire. It's the same reason why I don't think he's going to reject that the Moses staff is going to change from a staff to a snake. He wouldn't reject those things. In fact, in the whole section of chapter 17, he makes the case that these are all possible. They're within the power of God. That's the function of a miracle. So, and just because we have those isolated incidents does not mean the whole scientific theory is not out of the equation. So I believe he will look at everything on its own epistemic turf. If he was alive today, God knows best, wallahu alam, right? But I would say the farthest, if he knew all these positions and presentations, I would say the closest he would go to is Adamic Exceptionalism, because it would not harm the theory, yet the creation narrative of Adam would still be maintained. I think he would give equal weight to both. And this is what I try to do, that in a conversation like this, what I see is two extremes. The science completely overrides the hermeneutics. This I disagree with. And vice versa, the hermeneutics completely overrides the science. I think that he would have operated on a level where just kind of you take the epistemologies of both and reach as best a reconciliation as possible. And that's why I make it very clear. I say explicitly, Al-Ghazālī would closely align with Adamic Exceptionalism if he believed evolution to be true. But his framework is compatible with all those positions there. God knows best. Wallahu a'lam.
Thank you.
No problem. Enis, do you want me to take up the questions that are coming up?
If there is no one who wants to ask, I will look at the chat.
Okay, go ahead.
Is Caner Taslaman from No Exception Camp?
How I've interpreted Professor Caner is he is in the no exceptions camp. He says that we should, as far as I remember, he maintains an agnostic stance on the idea of miracles. He says that there's nothing in scripture that warrants a reading of Adam being created miraculously. So I would say he'd be in the no exceptions camp. This is in his English work, by the way. I can't claim to talk about the Turkish. This is what I've read in English.
By the way, Caner Taslaman is here right now.
Oh, there you go. Go ahead. You can ask him.
Caner Hocam, maybe you want to answer it or not.
I don't think he's there.
Maybe he's not here. Okay. So Esra Karaca wants to ask a question. So Esra.
Professor, firstly, thank you for your presentation. I have read something and I want to ask about it. There is an opinion which mentions about semi-humanic creature that comes before Adam and has born uterus. And, that's something feminine. Not a human, doesn't have any consciousness, but initiated humanity. And while they claim that, they take based on Surah Nisa 21, Surah Nisa verse 21.
The word nafs. That one, right? Nafs al-wahida.
Nafs al-wahida. What do you think about it? I really wonder your opinion about that.
So just to be clear, Isra, you're asking me that people have interpreted this as there was a pre-conscious human? Is that what this verse is? Is that how some people interpret this verse?
So, Professor, can you repeat again?
Yeah, so are you asking me that some people have interpreted this verse in a way where there are like pre-humanids. Like, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. For me, because there's one opinion that I look at in the no exceptions camp, Daoud Abdul Fattah Bachelor. He argues very similar. In fact, he argues that nafs al-wahida in this particular verse is referring to a zygote. A zygote meaning the fertilized egg inside a pre-Adamic entity, right? That's what he's referring it to. And so for me, that's a huge stretch of the verse, because nafs means an individual generally, and doesn't mean a zygote. And more than that, I mean, if you couple these explanations with the hadith, it's referring to Adam and Eve, because if you follow the verse, خَلَقَكُم مِّن نَفْسٍ وَاحِدَةٍ وَمِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا, from it, it's a partner. And then after that it says, وَمِنْهُمَا, from both of them, رِجَالٌ بَثَّهُمَا رِجَالٌ كَثِيرٌ وَنِسَاءٌ, countless men and women. So for me, there is the idea that this is referring to a pre-Adamic entity or something like that doesn't make sense. The standard usage is fine to kind of refer to Adam, a single individual, and Eve. However, and this is where I think we need to be clear and fair with our hermeneutics, the verse does not say Adam, nor does the verse say Eve. You can only interpret them as Adam and Eve in light of the other verses and the hadith. So I will make this as an equal treatment. But I don't believe that verse has another meaning. So this verse, if you look at the classical tafasir, there have been two opinions on this verse, generally speaking, according to the language of the Arabic, right? These two opinions are as follows. Number one, and it's nothing to do with Adam, it's to do with the interpretation of Eve. So when it says وَخَلَقَ مِنْهَا زَوْجَهَا, this part is where the difference of opinion comes from. One opinion says that this means that Eve was created from a part of Adam, literally a physical part of Adam. So the whole, the narrative that we have, even in Christianity, created from the rib, that could be one explanation. The other interpretation of this verse is that Eve was made in the same sur, is in the same essence, the same as Adam, the same essence. These are the only, so in this case, Eve was not made as a part of Adam, but she was made in the same image as him. Both are miraculous interpretations at the end of the day, but these were the two plausible interpretations according to Tafasir. So I don't personally see anything else apart from this in this verse. I don't see the idea of preceding that. This verse makes it, at least one of those verses that makes it clear in light of the hadith and the other verses, it's referring to Adam and Eve. God knows best. Wallahu a'lam.
So Nuruddin.
Nuruddin, you want me to go to the chat box? There's a question there from Nuruddin. Enis?
No, he has raised his hand, so I guess.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Thank you, brother Shoaib. I want to ask two questions. The first is from your reading about maybe Adamic Exceptionalism. Did Al-Ghazālī accept the possibility of the evolution of spirit? For example, the Catholic world, for example, maybe accept the bodily evolved Adam, but they reject the possibility of evolution of spirit. So according to your reading, did Ghazali accept the possibility of evolution of the spirit, not the material body? And the second question, is there any discussion about mechanism of evolution in Ghazali thought? For example, in Rumi talk about the mechanism of evolution based on the love. That is, I think this is different from the modern new Darwinian mechanism of evolution. Is there any discussion about mechanism of evolution in Ghazali talk as far as your reading? Thank you.
So great questions, Brother Nuruddin. Thank you. So the first question about Ghazali's thoughts on evolution, on the evolution of the spirit. So if you look at some of his more Sufi works, like The Alchemy of Happiness, Mishkat al-Anwar, right? In there, you definitely get a sense that he believes that spirituality happens in darajat. They're like stages of your spiritual development. That's as far as evolution kind of goes in the spiritual domain. It's a bit unclear. He definitely believed in this idea that there was something in that was immaterial. That's definitely clear in some of his more spiritual works. But in terms of more than that, I didn't get anything. There's actually a really good book that was done on Ghazali's understanding on his spiritual formation. There are two books, in fact. One was a book by Ali Usman in 1962 from Egypt. So if you check him out, Ali Usman, 1962 Ghazali, you'll find it. There's another book from 2001 by Timothy Giannotti. He also talks about the role of Ghazali's understanding of the spirit in light of his different frameworks, him as a mutakallim, him as a Sufi, and so on and so on. So those two works, I think, will be sufficient to address that question. As for the idea of Rumi, and so in chapter 5 of my book, I go through how some people use classical thinkers to talk about evolution. Rumi is one of them. Rumi is not talking about evolution in there. He, in fact, has a metaphysical picture where the world is arranged according to a metaphysical level of perfection. So God is at the top, then come angels or the nous or whatever, then comes the material world with humans and animals and plants. It looks like evolution. It's has a very clear structural similarity with evolution, but it's a metaphysical position that talks about ontological fixations. There is no idea of this being derived from this or this being derived from that. That concept is a new concept. It doesn't exist in our literature. So Rumi did not talk about neo-Darwinism. He in fact was talking about this imagery of the great inner being in spiritual and mystical terms. In fact, the number one guy you may want to look up, who's one of the world's experts on Rumi, is William Chittick. I in fact talked to him when I came to writing that article. So he's somebody you may want to look up.
So thank you. There is one question I see in the chat. So concerning the Adamic Exceptionalism, how is the position scripturally compatible with Quran verse 2, ayat 30?
Okay, right. So this is when the angels asked, so Fatma, thank you very much for your question. So this is when the angels asked, are you going to put something on earth that causes corruption and bloodshed, right? She's saying, doesn't this imply at this time no humans were on earth? On the contrary, Mufassirin have talked the opposite. They have said this suggests that there were things there that committed these things, right? We don't know what they were, right? Some people say Hin and Bin. Some people say it was Iblis and his minions. But there was a modern tafsir that gave a very interesting opinion. How can this be jinn? Jinn don't bleed. Jinn do not bleed, right? So, and so he mentioned the point that if the angels saw Adam and then they asked this question, they must have thought of something similar. Like he must have had a similar idea, similar hands, maybe similar language or whatever have you, similar components to be able to arrive at that. So, it could be referring to an array of things and a range of things. So this doesn't actually negate the idea of there being no human beings on earth. In fact, I would say it argues for the opposite, if anything. You've got to bear in mind that generally speaking, in our scripture, there is nothing qat'i, nothing definitive about what existed on earth on Adam's descendants. Very zero, if anything, right? Zero. So that verse doesn't really cut it as far as I can tell.
So, any question? So can you share the position of Sayyid Hussein Nasr?
Sure. So before so Fatma, you're welcome. Isra, you had your hand up earlier. Did I answer your question? Just let me know. So please do let me know in the chat box if I addressed your concern or not, because I forgot to ask you if that did. Okay, all right, okay. No, Fatma, Isra. This was Isra who asked earlier. I just want to make sure that she got her answer. So I can answer that, Enis, but I think before that, there's a question about fi ahsani taqweem. Can I answer that? Yeah?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay, so Arafat, this question about, this is in Surah Teen, وَالطِّينِ وَالزَّيْتُونِ وَطُورِ سِينِينَ وَهَذَا الْبَلَدِ الْأَمِينَ لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَاهُ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So Allah creating the best of the molds, right? But then do not stop the verse there. Go to the verse afterwards. ثُمَّ رَدَدْنَاهُ أَسْفَلَ سَافِلِينَ. Allah put you to the lowest of the low. And then it goes on to say, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Right? Except those who believe and do righteous deeds. This has nothing to do with evolution. Interestingly, it's been used, this very verse has been used by people to argue against evolution, and it's been used to argue for evolution. For the people who use it to argue against evolution, they say this is talking about the takreem that Allah has given humans. But they don't realize that the verses are not referring about his physical body. It's referring to piety. إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. That's what the surah is referring to. We cannot be atomistic. For the people who use it for, they say that ahsani taqween means the most fit, as in it's talking about that creation. Human beings were created to be best fitting for their environment. So it has like an evolutionary edge to it. Both of these are wrong because it's not talking about the physical construction of the human being. It's talking about humans doing the right thing, believing in the right things. So if you look at the whole thing together, that's a very isolated understanding of that verse. That's what that is referring to. I hope that answered your question. Right, okay. Can you please share the position of Professor Sayyid Hassan Nas? Yeah, so Sayyid Hassan Nas, you know, may Allah have mercy on this guy. He's one of, for me, he's an amazing individual, right? I disagree with him on evolution, but he's an amazing individual, right? So he has this opinion, and this is one of the things that make him very unique in the creationist camp. So he's a creationist. He believes that common ancestry is false altogether. He rejects evolution because he adopts a Neoplatonic worldview, which means that essences are fixed. So if you have the essence of a human being, you cannot change the essence of a human being into something else. A monkey is a monkey, human is a human, a dog is a dog, a cat is a cat. There is no transformation whatsoever. So as a result of that, he rejects evolution, not because of Quran and Hadith, not because of science. Now, of course, he may have issues with the science, whatever have you, but his primary mode of rejection for rejecting evolution is his metaphysics. He adopts a worldview within which, at least according to him, essences cannot change. So therefore, humans cannot be something else. They were not something else before. So that is his take on the whole position. Him and his student, Osman Bakr from Malaysia, they both adopt this narrative. That is their position. I hope that answered your question, Mohammed. Let me know. Right. Enis, you want me to keep on going? Take the next question?
There's just one question left. So, is Adamic exceptionalism compatible with believing authenticity of hadith?
Aristotle, I'm assuming this is your name, so yes, that it is compatible. There's nothing in scripture that denies the possibility. Again, I want to make sure this is crystal clear. The principle that is being used to argue for Adamic exceptionalism is the tawaqquf, which is a theological and hermeneutic stance. If scripture does not state something, you cannot make either a case for it or against it using scripture. It is why you do not see Muslim scholars saying it is haram for you to believe in dinosaurs or it's haram for you to not believe in dinosaurs, because both are compatible with the Quran. It is not mentioned in the Quran, it is not discussed in the Quran, has zero effect on the Quran. So whether you personally accept or not makes no difference to you on the Day of Judgment. Ultimately, that's what it's about. You on the Day of Judgment, right? So if you say something Allah has done in the past and that's false, Allah can question you on the Day of Judgment, right? Because you're stating something on behalf of God. You're stating something on behalf of God. So is there anything in the Hadith or the Quran that talks about pre or co-Adamic human beings? Zero. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing whatsoever. So you could accept it, you could not accept it. The waqf, both are possible. So I hope that addresses your question. We have one more. Dr. Shahnawaz, what is Shia theology? So Dr. Shahnawaz, I actually am working with two people who are developing the whole discourse of evolution from a Shia perspective. We have a conference coming up in June. The conference is actually called Islam and Evolution. So it's a conference dedicated to developing theological perspectives and philosophical perspectives on evolution. And we have some fantastic individuals. They've shown me their manuscript. It's phenomenal. There are some now important differences between the Shii corpus and the Sunni corpus. One of them, and this is interesting, the Shii corpus contains hadith that talk about other human beings before Adam, called the Nesnas. That is very interesting. Very, very interesting. So they're working on this. One of them is hopefully going to be publishing into a book. I'm helping them with that. But that will be coming out soon. But yeah, the Shii discourse on Islam and evolution is very rich. It's very, very rich. It's very interesting. So yeah, that's what I can say. Yep. Nuruddin, according to your reading, Ghazali only touches on the possibility of evolution, but tends to be silent about the mechanism of evolution. In the modern world, Nuruddin, so Ghazali doesn't talk about evolution, period. He has no discussion. Evolution is a modern concept. I am just taking the metaphysical framework of a medieval scholar and his hermeneutics to talk about a contemporary engagement, because I believe the Turath, the intellectual heritage of Islam, does have things to offer. So that's why I chose Ghazali, right? So that should be crystal clear. He has never discussed evolution. I am putting his framework into discussion with evolution. Dr. Shana, when will you publish your book in paper? Dr. Shanawaz, it will come out hopefully in June, on the 21st of June, but you can actually download it as a PDF. It's going to be open access, inshallah. Yeah.
So I think, oh, there is a question from David. So yes, David.
David.
Assalamu alaikum.
By the way, this is the guy I was talking about. This is David.
Yeah. I have a question about people that advocate Adamic exceptionalism. If Adamic exceptionalism cannot rule out that Adam and Eve's descendants could have intermarried with these pre-existing populations, how do they account for the fact that the Quran says we are all Bani Adam, so that every last one of us has to trace their lineage back to Adam without exception?
Mm-hmm.
How would they deal with that issue?
Right, okay. I think somebody asked something very similar. So somebody asked about Abu Bashar and what have you. So for the same reason, Bani Adam simply means that we are children of Adam. Again, it's a title, right? We are all children of Adam. We can trace our lineage back to him. But the Quran does not deny the possibility that there could have been pre or co-Adamic species through which Adam's descendants could have had relationships with, and thus forming a lineage to the modern times. So Bani Adam does not negate that whatsoever. It just simply says all human beings today can trace themselves back in a lineage to Adam and Eve. That is not being negated. Right, so, okay.
Thank you very much. I have just a small comment. There is a nice book about the David's question, the genealogical Adam and Eve.
Yes, I was about to say that, Enis. I was about to say that. Joshua Somiras, literally very good book. One of the most
Joshua, he defends that actually. I don't know I think his view is that there is Adamic exceptionalism, and he tries to give an argument why actually we can still claim that all the people living today, they move to Adam. Actually, he believes, like the literal Christian claim, that Adam was living before 6,000 years ago, and still he can be the common father of all human beings living today. Actually, since as we move backwards, the number of ancestors increases exponentially. So I have 2 mother, father, 2, in the next generation 4, then in the next generation 8. Suddenly it increases so much that eventually everyone shares a common ancestor in a pretty close age. Like probably everyone in Anatolia has a common ancestor before 500 years or so.
Yeah, exactly.
Even maybe 200 years. So
exactly.
Since it goes exponentially, there's no problem in claiming that we are all descendants of Adam, even though there were other people living together with him.
Yeah, can I say one thing about that, Enis? In that book, as far as I remember, I don't think he believes in the 6,000 creation.
Yeah, maybe not.
Yeah, he says that it's compatible even as early as 6,000. So even if Adam was created 6,000, it does not mess up the science as such. Right. I'm just going to share my email because I think we're at the end, if I'm not mistaken. So guys, if you have any questions, feel free to question me. At the end of the day, I'm just building up on work that people like David, Yasir Qadi, and others have done. And yeah, I hope this presentation was of benefit to everybody here. And I would also like to thank particularly David and Nazif. They were both incredibly helpful in terms of making arrangements of, sometimes they send me chapters as late as 3 a.m., 4 a.m. to kind of help me with deadlines. So I'm grateful to them. But I hope that all this work will be of benefit to the wider Muslim community. And I hope it provides clarity. I don't mind if people disagree with Ghazali. That's not the concern of the book. If it offers clarity, that is more than enough. That's what I intend to hopefully achieve with this book, inshallah.
So thank you very much. by the way, before closing, there is one comment that some people use mitochondrial Eve or Y chromosome Adam to defend that all people are descended from Adam. This is a bad sign. You can not use it. That's bad science. You cannot use this information to trace us like to a single being. Anyway, you may do a Google search and find out. So thank you very much for attending to this nice meeting. Hope to see you in our next debates in contemporary Kalam.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Thank you.